Black people are and were America's biggest cash crop. More than rice, more than sugar cane or cotton or anything. The biggest selling product of America was Black bodies. In Virginia and Maryland, primarily, but all over, they had things called breeding plantations. Some of the founding fathers of this country owned breeding plantations where it wasn't like they were just there to work that farm. No, they was there to produce babies. There was expectations of boys and girls to produce a certain amount of children by a certain age. If you could not produce those kids, then if you were a boy, you would be castrated. If you were a girl who could not produce a certain amount of children, you might be quartered, you might be experimented on, like the history of gynecology in America. All of these things are passed down generationally that hinder us from whether it be expressing within interpersonal relationships of love or passion and lust and all these other feelings, pleasure, even self-pleasure. It's important to know even the terrible parts of history because it shapes today so strongly. A new thing just came out about the numbers, like from Pornhub and other things about what's the most viewed and things like that. And like trans was like one of the highest forms of things, and we
Interesting.
see so many trans people, well, all trans people in America specifically are under attack right now. But it can't be only people in blue states watching this, right?
Right.
But you see also every year, ebony or black or whatever they want to classify it as, is also in top. And we are not the highest percentage of people here, you know?
Right.
When I first got into the industry, we were paid less. I'm sure in a lot of cases we are still paid less. White women would charge more to be with black men, regardless of your size, because there was still this thing, there's still a company out there right now called Black, where it's black men with white women. But if you think about what the term black means, it means you've been soiled, stained, or sullied now that you've been with a black
Interesting. But that's very
man.
much back, that harkens back to slavery times as well, right?
Absolutely.
Which is
Absolutely.
why it was so taboo and against the law and it was illegal for when there were those moments, even if there was a consensual romantic relation between a black man and a white woman. But still, you couldn't even look at one because they
Yeah,
were on the pedestal, right?
absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think that for a lot of black men who are trying to make it in this industry or who wound up in this industry, there are some who are just like, I got to make this money. I'm going to pick whatever it is and go that way. But for some, I do think that there is a certain part of them that wants to be accepted by white society and viewed as beautiful in the white eye.
Mm.
So it's like, if the only thing you're going to love about me is my skin and my endowment, so be it. Like, not the content of my character, my intelligence, my wit, my love, or anything. So I do think all of that from the past plays a huge factor in where we are right now. And I think it is important to say, especially in this time of DEI and erasure of history, it's important to know even the terrible parts of history because it shapes today so strongly. And I get into these conversations and I see the comments when I speak on this because me and Jasmine, we do something called the Decolonization of Sex lecture series. And we talk about this history. And it's always like, I never owned slaves.
Mm.
My family didn't own slaves. But if your family was here in America, slavery was not a household thing. Slavery was a communal thing. Slavery was an institution. Slavery was a national thing, right? So if you lived in a town and you needed your boot blacked or your horseshoe fixed, your cow milked, you might not have owned a slave, but you use the slaves' work.
Right.
Or when you went to your town hall and it was built by slaves. So even if your family didn't own our ancestors, they benefited from the money that was in that bank, from the rice that they ate,
Right.
across the board.
Hmm.
So when we move into where we're at today and we're still commodified, whether it's for our culture or still our bodies, it plays a major role.
I'm curious how you approach conversations around Black pleasure as something that is sacred and that it's healing and it's worthy of protection when we're confronted with brothers still talking about how anaconda like they're endowed or how her booty has to be so big and we have the gaze of the booty, that sort of thing.
I think one, we live in a very patriarchal society,
Mm.
right? And misogyny isn't just hip hop. Hip hop didn't invent misogyny. It definitely pushes it if you're listening to that, but you could also find some other artists who don't push it at all. I think if you look to your oppressor for the best food, you're still gonna wind up with McDonald's. You know what I'm saying? They're not gonna give you steak and asparagus. They're gonna give you McDonald's. And we definitely sold out a lot of ownership as you move through the 1900s, right? Like, I was just watching this documentary on the Negro Leagues,
Mm.
and Jackie Robinson is a personal hero of mine. Like, I don't think you should be racist, period. And I don't think people should make the big deal they did about swinging a stick at a ball. But all
Mhm.
that to say, when Jackie Robinson started playing for the Dodgers, people went to go watch the Dodgers. Our people, they stopped going to see the Negro Leagues, right? Same thing with music. When you were able to play in front of integrated crowds or white crowds, you sold more records.
Right.
So everybody was like, well, like what was it, like Ray Charles, even though his first small label was also white owned, but he went to a bigger white owned label. He didn't just start Ray Charles Records and push
Hmm.
it on his own. He needed that distribution that only the white company had. And then also you think about it, like when we do try to build our own banks, they Tulsa, they
Right.
Tulsa our banks. You know what I'm saying? So we're working against someone who doesn't want us to succeed at times, and people are making choices to feed their families or get rich or survive, or it's so many factors. I do think when we look at our history, right, like past slavery, like beyond that, back to the continent, we had so many different ranges of people, different cultures, different nations, different empires. And in some of those nations and empires, people did things that looked just like twerking.
Mm.
Like I was in Curacao, and in Curacao, they have this museum that's like dedicated to the diaspora, and they have these old, like carved fertility dolls and goddesses and gods, and they
Mm.
show the shape of our body, and some of them show the endowment of maybe what they felt was the endowment you should have back in the day. Sometimes judge ourselves based on a Eurocentric lens as well. Because if you look at like, and I'm not talking about ancient pagan European culture, but the dominant culture in Europe at a certain time was you were completely covered up. But then after they paraded Sarah Bartman around, they started putting those cages in the back of their dresses to make them look like they had asses too.
Right.
So like it's so I guess the only word I can think is like so convoluted in every single which way, right? I
Mhm.
think that sometimes we have to be able to get to the individual of what makes us feel good, what makes us feel respected or pleased. Like I'll say me, for example, right? I, at sometimes, like a little degradation in my pleasure.
Hmm.
I like when my partner calls me a whore. It feels good to me. But at the same time, I'm still king. So you call me king whore if you want to. That's cool. But I don't like you calling me out of my name.
Mm.
I don't want you to call me anything where it sounds like we're related. Like don't call me daddy. Don't call me none of that poppy stuff. I don't want any of that. So that's me individually. So I think it's important for us to know what pleases us and stand 10 toes down on that. Like, I don't like if you call me a bitch, like, don't do that. Don't support music that makes you feel like less than who you are or what you are. If you rock with that shit, rock with that shit. You know what I'm saying? I
Mm-hmm.
do think that there's some individual aspects of it, but it is very important that we don't settle for less than what we want or feel that we deserve for ourselves.